Today I'm going to show you a little known Ableton Live device that will turn anything into a groove for you. This tool is super powerful but very underrated in my opinion. I'm talking about the envelope follower in Ableton Live. So I was already pretty familiar with this technique on my modular synth, but I completely forgot that you can do this in Ableton as well. So I have to give credit where credit is due. There's a video by Lotus Tunes, which is another great channel, that reminded me that you can do this easily in Ableton Live as well. He's in a slightly different genre of electronic music, so I'm going to show you more techno-oriented folks how you can use an envelope follower in Ableton Live for your next projects. Before we jump in, I have a free gift for you. It's called the Finisher Framework. You can get it at pickyourself.com/framework. The link is down below in the description. It's just my 3 simple steps that you can use to finish at least one great sounding song per month. So go to pickyourself.com/framework and I will see you over there. So first of all, what even is an envelope follower and why do you need it? So an envelope follower analyzes the waveform of any given sound. And then you can use this extracted information to do other things with it. You can use this as a modulation source and basically map the envelope of one sound to whatever other parameter you want to map it to. Let me give you a practical example. So here in this channel we have a kick drum and we have a pad sound. I'm only going to play those 2 sounds together now. And what an envelope follower will do is it will analyze the envelope of the kick drum that's playing, and then you can map it to, for example, the gain of this pad sound. Let me show you how this is done. So we'll get the envelope follower and we'll put this onto the kick drum channel. Now on the pad channel, we need, for example, a utility. You can use any other parameter that allows you to adjust the gain. And then we will map the envelope follower to the gain here. Now this is going to sound a bit off in the beginning, but what you will see here is the gain of the kick drum that's playing. And as you can see, the exact envelope is being tracked here and mapped onto the gain of the pad. Every time the kick drum hits, the gain is being brought up. Now the cool thing about an envelope follower is that it allows you to dial in some parameters slightly more interestingly. And so instead of just using the shape as it is, you can of course increase the gain just to make the effect stronger. But you can also change the shape of the envelope that's being tracked. So for example, the rise parameter lets it slide in a bit. And the fall parameter lets it ring out a bit. So this is almost like attack and decay from a synth. The third parameter here is the delay. So this means you can basically delay the envelope either in milliseconds or a musical tempo. So let's say we delay this by an 1/8 note. And you notice this is almost like sidechaining the sound to the kick drum. Very interesting. And you can then play with this creatively. You can create a certain rhythm out of these two. But what's really boring right now is that the source material is coming from a kick drum. So let's switch things up and make it a bit more interesting by tracking the envelope of a complex signal. So I have this percussion loop here. And as you can see and hear, this is a more complex signal. It's relatively rich. It has a lot of variation, a lot of dynamics. Now what happens if we map this to the pad sound that we heard before? So we select map. We then go to gain, the other channel, and then we probably have to adjust the gain a tiny bit here. Now this follows precisely this complex sound that we had before, and we turned a pad into basically a percussion loop. The interesting thing here is that you can also just use the source signal as an influence, like a ghost envelope that's basically applied to the other channel. So I can bring this down, I can mute this channel, and we'll still use the envelope and apply it to the pad sound. Now this starts to become fun when you bring in other rhythmic sources. So for example, I can bring in some other percussions. And then I can start to play around with the different settings. So for example, increase the rise, increase the fall, change the delay of the signal, or I can use an LFO to change these things dynamically so it gets even more interesting and evolving. So I've loaded up this LFO and I can then map it to, for example, the rise and the fall parameters. Not make it too extreme, just a tiny bit. Change the rates, so let's see. And theoretically I can also sync this to the tempo if I want to. Now this creates really interesting evolving textures and rhythms that you would have otherwise not found. For the last part of this video, I'm going to show you my absolute favorite use case for this, which is transforming boring stock loops into super interesting lead sounds. So if you're curious about that, stay tuned. And if you got any value out of this video so far, then consider subscribing, consider liking this video. This really helps me grow this thing, make more videos for you, and keep going. So here I have a lead sound. It's a very simple loop, pretty boring I think. It has nice texture, but it's kind of repetitive and not rhythmically interesting. And this is a perfect use case for using an envelope follower to turn this into something unique and then also add other effects on top. So let's do that. So I have this utility already loaded up. We go to our modulation source and we map the envelope follower to the gain here. Now I will have to dial this in a little bit because as you can hear, you don't hear much, so I have to increase the gain a bit. Now this completely destroys the original loop, but that is intentional. This is what we want. Then we can dial in the rise and fall settings to kind of bring a little bit of the original back in. And I want this graininess, I want this to be like still a little bit destroyed, because what we can then do is we bring in a little bit of distortion and then delay, and yeah, stay tuned for how this is gonna sound because you're really gonna dig it. So let's add a little bit of saturation. So in this saturator I've used the sine wave fold, which is kind of a wave folding function, and I've only mixed this in like 30% or so. Let's see what that does. And so you can hear it just crushes the edges of the sound a tiny bit more, and this is exactly what we want here. Now, next, let's load up the flanger in doubler mode, because this is something that I really think works well here. Already I like this so much, it's very, very nice. What we're now gonna do is we're gonna throw an echo and a little bit of reverb on top of this, and you will hear a lead sound that is very transformed from what it originally was, and then we can play around with the modulation. So here's our echo. Let's just change the sync a tiny bit. Very nice. And what you can then do is you can play around with the settings here on the envelope follower, change the rise and the fall parameters, or once again use an LFO to modulate it. I have no idea what this sounds like. Okay, so this gets really extreme. You have to be careful, especially the gain. If it's too high, then it's basically not working. Here in this case, it's probably because the modulation depth is a bit too high here. I'll bring this back to 0 here. Okay, I really like how this sounds. Let's now bring in the other signals and see how everything fits together. Alright, that is it. Thanks for watching. Before you leave, make sure to drop a comment below and let me know what you found helpful and what do you still need help with. If you have any follow-up questions, just drop them here in the comments. I'm super active there. I will most likely reply and at least read it, and then we'll see each other in the next video.